you. And so again, welcome everybody to this month's February Viz and Tell. And I'm not going to go back over everything I just said, but where we're about to go into is our backstory about kind of thinking about tools and our approaches to tools here at Visualizing the Future. When we first kind of were thinking about the grant, we really noticed that a lot of us visualization work in libraries were kind of put into these roles that really emphasize teaching tools. And we also, we kind of saw this oftentimes at the expense of providing maybe a more critical approach to data visualization practice and methods. And so from the beginning on this grant, we were really trying to advocate for being tool agnostic and kind of not advocating for any one single tool as we were with this grant or even a suite of tools, but rather really trying to think about the way that we work with tools in a much more holistic sort of process and really kind of emphasizing the visualization process and really just kind of thinking about what that means for us as librarians in these roles. And so that's really a really abbreviated sort of backstory, but I hope it kind of, kind of gives us a little starting point. And this also kind of leads us into the survey questions and why we asked some of the questions that we did. And one thing that we were really curious about is just sort of getting a sense of what tools people kind of feel that they're required, maybe in some cases actually required, but what tools and software and things do we really feel like we need to teach in our roles? And that was kind of one thing that we were really trying to pull and get out of that survey. And one of the things that was really nice from the results, and if you look in the live notes document, you kind of just see we had to create some really quick word clouds there, but one of the things is that for most of us, there wasn't a real required set, but there were certainly some things where that yes, these are some of these tools that we really do need to kind of teach and show. And one of the things that Ryan and I were also talking about before this Viz and Tell was also thinking about the tools that that maybe we sometimes think about dissuade faculty from using. So sort of required, but maybe there's also tools that maybe we kind of try to steer people away from. The second question, this was also really, really quite nice to kind of see this. The second question, we kind of asked to sort of see, what level of support you had at your institutions for really exploring outside of those required tools. And I think, again, this was really nice to see where almost everybody felt that they were really encouraged to kind of step outside beyond that sort of the required sort of landscape and really, are encouraged and allowed to kind of explore other tools and software. And then lastly, the question that I think we really want to maybe really consider in the discussion today is sort of what's that one thing that really the one consideration that you have in terms of choosing a tool or software. And it was really interesting for the people who did respond, it was really overwhelmingly about accessibility. And so this could be a really interesting thing to talk a bit about, but both in terms of ease of use of the tool and software, but also just making sure that students have continued access to them. So that's sort of the brief survey results. And for those who weren't able to fill it out, I promise it is a very, very quick survey, and it'd be great to maybe get a few more data points. So I'm just going to drop in the link. And if you have a minute, just go ahead and fill it out, and we can kind of give a full sort of sharing of these results when we send on this Viz and Tell. So sort of with that, I think we're ready to kind of, I think, just dive into our discussion. We have two we're going to explore, one more generally just about pedagogical approaches. And then the second, if we kind of get to it, is sort of taking a step back and more meta sort of critical look on how we actually teach with the tools and software. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Ryan to get us started on this part. Again, please drop questions and comments into our Google document. feel free in the and again, really want to emphasize just sort of being considerate with the discussion points and trying to have a space for everyone to be able to sort of engage and talk. And we're really hoping that this particular conversation is much more of a circle, and not sort of talking at one another, but we really kind of have dialogue with everybody here. So we're both looking forward to learning a lot with you today. So go ahead, Ryan.
Great, thanks, Andy. So yeah, just to reemphasize a couple of points, if you have a point you would like to make, feel free to use the hand raising feature in Zoom. You'll pop up to the top left of my left corner of my window, so I'll be able to see you there and bring you up. Or you can feel free to put a question in the chat or the document, and I'll kind of be keeping an eye on both of those as we go. But for the first portion of our discussion today, we're going to talk about some of these pedagogical approaches to teaching tools. When Andy and I were discussing this, one of the approaches that I've experienced in working with faculty is I've had a couple of faculty now who will teach the majority of the class with one tool, and I'll be supporting the students in working with one tool. Say we're working with R and ggplot to make visualizations for most of the class, and then there'll be an assignment near the end of the class where the students need to go and work in Tableau, say, to create visualizations using the same kind of conceptual learning they've been talking about through the beginning of the class, but in a different tool. This is one of these kind of tool agnostic approaches that we were discussing, and we're wondering, do folks have experience with that? Have folks tried that on their own? This was in a faculty-led course where it was a semester-long course, so it's much easier to teach with one tool and then switch to another. But I'm wondering if folks have experiences with that in more on-demand sessions. I'm just going to kind of open it up here.
I see, Emma, if you wanted to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Sure.
Oh, yeah.
Hi. Hi, Emma Slayton. I work as the data visualization, curation, and GIS librarian at Carnegie Mellon University. That means that I wear many hats and so have a really deep feeling for the question that you just asked. I do work in a couple courses that are couple weeks or full semesters that do offer that time, as you're mentioning, to really engage deeply with different types of tools. But if it's on a one-time bespoke question, or we're working in a limited time workshop, it really depends on what is the focus of that research question that someone is coming to you with. So for example, for me, if it's, I use a mapping example because I'm a mapper at heart, but if you have to create something that's a simple map, that can be done in many tools, and sometimes showing people how it can be done in different tools actually is a great way to explore not only the challenges with different types of software, but also the ways that we can critically approach research questions from different perspectives based on the primary tool of the primary goal of the software. So for example, Tableau's main goal is visualizations, showcasing information visually, but ArcGIS's main goal is to create a map that has deeper contextual meaning. So showcasing to students how to map in both different softwares can be effective to get them to ask those deeper research questions. And doing that within a short workshop is possible as long as the question is simple. However, if you're working with something more complex, someone really wants to do analytics, then it's best to stick with a software that is built for that, primarily, such as ArcGIS. So that it just kind of depends on what the level of the research question is, and if the goal of the pedagogy is to get people to critically engage with deeper thinking around software, or critically engage with deeper thinking around the results of a certain type of analysis. Sorry for the long response.
That's great. Thank you. I think that so everyone knows, if they missed it in the chat, Emma was responding to a question from Jordan, which was, is it better to be tool agnostic or find topically agnostic tools? And Devin, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, this is my first time doing the hand raising thing, so it's interesting. And I definitely agree, Emma, it's all about like, what is that goal? And I remember not so long ago being a student, and a professor would have an assignment that felt like it was wildly different than the goals that they had told us they had for the course at the beginning. And I knew that they were going after something there, but if you didn't make the goal explicit about why the context was changing, then it can really be damaging for the full foundation that people are building when you're teaching them about these tools. And so like if you're switching gears, making sure to sort of underline that you're saying, this is a problem that can be solved in many different ways. Let's look at a different tool. If you don't do that, then people are like, wait, is there something wrong with what I've been doing before? And you sow the seed of doubt that can undermine so many things.
Thank you. Jordan, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Yeah. So I was going to confess that before I was a librarian, I was a faculty member who taught GIS. My deepest and most sincere condolences to any librarian who had to work with me at that point in my life. I did not understand your value. Thank you for welcoming me into your community. So I have seen this happen. And you know, the midstream can be a rough thing. And I think to just layer upon that is when we talk about agnostic tools or being tool agnostic, there's always the aspect of open source to keep in. So students who are part of universities or faculty who are part of universities may have different access to different proprietary packages like ARC versus QGIS or QGIS. So when we think about pedagogy and what we're doing for one-offs, how do we also be subscription agnostic? So when I had to decide, am I going to teach people ARC Pro versus QGIS? What do I think they're going to go on and do with their life? If they're going to be academics, yes, by all means, you may have ARC Pro if you go to an institution that can afford it. But maybe for the long run, QGIS would be more appropriate. Therefore, when I asked the question about topically agnostic tools, like say R and Python, I know a student is going to be able to go on to use it whenever they need to, however they need to. If I can just give them the skills to do that. And we're working with faculty whose perceptions may be based on the value of learning tools that are subscribed to because it's there for them and perceivably will be for a while. I think navigating what Ryan brought up, navigating those changes in that aspect is really important as well. So to add on to the accessibility issue, when we talk about accessibility, we may be also talking about financial accessibility. If it's not accessible to students after they graduate, what then? How useful are those skills in data visualization? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think Andy and I had a bit of a discussion about this when we were talking about these topics too, because for myself, coming from a small liberal arts college where I work with a lot of economics faculty who they see all of the students, they're going to go on and they're going to become economists and they're going to go on to grad school and they're going to keep working in it. So they're going to keep having access to these subscription tools, possibly in these licenses. So I'm wondering if if anyone has anything there on how to negotiate that with faculty, as Jordan was saying, when faculty think students might need a certain tool because that's what the university subscribes to, versus one that will be more usable for them as they move on. Yeah, and Devin had noted always hearing about folks having to jump between ARC and Q as soon as they graduate and lose access to that subscription, which is a common thing. Matt, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to respond to that, but I'm following the chat, and I think that Todd has kind of said a lot of what I was going to put in was just that sometimes the simple tools are the really ones that get the excitement going. I would never do my own data analysis or mapping in Tableau, but it's the first thing I will show to a student in a GIS class because they can, even in Tableau Public, they can take a list of states and have a fancy map out of it in like 20 seconds. In actual teaching stuff, I try to do, and I think that this is not a unique thing at all. I try to keep the theory of stuff real separate from the practical, like here's what buttons you click to do things. And I've had a good number of students that have gone and had to use open source tools afterwards, and that seems to have worked pretty well. If they understand why they're georeferencing something, the process to do it in QGIS is not that difficult to get going. But I think it kind of depends a little bit as well. Like I think in my data viz classes, so if we want to turn away from GIS and straight into data viz, I often will teach it all if I can. Like, so they'll start with Tableau, and every single student runs into the problem where they can't make Tableau do what they want it to do, because it's a limited platform, and it always has been and always will be. So that's the point that they're like, oh crud, I guess I really do have to learn R, and we go off and do things in R for a little while. And that's, you get about 70% of them that actually are interested in R afterwards, whereas you probably would be at about 20% if you just started straight with it. So sometimes teaching the limitations, I think, can be really, really useful on the tools too.
Thanks, Mac. Eric?
Yeah, I've got a little bit of a similar experience to what Matt was just talking about. I've actually, in teaching Python, I got to a portion where I was teaching aggregation using group by, and that to me, code, it's kind of so abstract, and you're seeing all the symbols on the screen, and you can eventually get to visualization, and I do, but I actually started the group by lessons by showing people Tableau. So I would load the same data in, showing how Tableau aggregates by default, and you can then break things apart by categories. And it was so much more visual and quick. And then after that 5 minutes in Tableau, I switched back over to Python, and then I could kind of say, we're doing the same thing here. It's just going to show up in tables until we can visualize. And I thought that was a nice introduction that ended up being, somewhat tool agnostic, but trying to get the concepts across.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's one of our other points about this pedagogical approach, and I think it came up a little bit earlier, was how to get the excitement going and show students that this is about research, and this isn't just about technically learning where to click and so on. This is about generating research questions and being able to make discoveries. When I first started teaching some of these tools, I would approach it as, we got to start with the very foundations and the basics, and then eventually we'll be able to make these beautiful visualizations. For R, we start with base R and we move to ggplot later. And then I had seen some approaches where, no, we start with ggplot and we start with making a visualization, and you see this really cool thing you can make, and then that's the hook. Like, you can make something cool and start to answer some of your research questions, and then you take the approach of, okay, let's break it down. Yeah, that sounds kind of like the approach of, we're going to break this down into the component pieces and see what's going on, and then approach those.
Can I ask, Catherine, if you're willing to sort of talk a little bit more? It seems like a lot of people are excited to kind of explore that hand-drawn data viz example. If you're willing to talk a little bit about that, I think that'd be really great.
Oh, sure. Internet connection willing. Apologies, everyone.
You sound perfect.
Can't have video. I may cut out. But yeah, I often introduce hand-drawn data viz examples actually at the very beginning of data viz classes, so that the introductory pieces students are seeing are something they feel like they can make. I feel like if I start with a D3 New York Times piece, a lot of students check out early and say, well, that's just not something I can do. And I've been surprised by reception from faculty members saying, you know what? If you want to do that all the way to your final project, I'll take it. Doesn't matter if it's a map. If you want to print out an outline of China, get some colored pencils and draw your data on top of it, I'll take it. And often that's the sort of gateway piece to get students interested. Yeah, old school. Highly recommend. If anyone's looking for a particular resource, I often recommend Mona Chalabi's work. I can put it in here, but students find it cheeky, so they also enjoy it.
Thank you, Anthony. I think that's great. I don't want to necessarily call you out, Joe, but you had said you also have worked a little bit with getting arts and humanities folks interested in data viz with this. Do you have anything else to say on that, or?
Yeah, I was actually typing as you called my name,
Sorry.
so and my camera reset, so hopefully you can still hear me.
Yep.
Every once in a while it flashes blue and my camera zooms in or out. So yeah, one of the things I work with, so I'm a biology background, you know, ecology, geography, and I'm more the geography, social sciences, and sciences side of things. So I work a lot with ArcGIS and, you know, Google Sheets, Tableau for a lot of our staff and our like business entrepreneurship people, because I'm at an academic university. So our arts and humanities folks are like, some of them work with online tools and some of them are completely new to the concept of data and think of it as like that quantitative numerical, you know, hard cold science. So it's very intimidating for them to get started with data viz, but there's so many cool things they can do with it. So I like to feature things like Mona Chalabi's work and other more, how do you express information or meaning with data viz? So looking at a lot of examples with data viz and dance. So there's a couple of cool projects or initiatives that I've worked with, you know, different positions of your body to according to like different parts of the data. So just different methods of, you know, visualization, moving it past that. So when I do class sessions and those to introduce them to data viz concepts, we often just start with drawing and charting out like on graph paper, because I grew up in like bio areas doing that. So I always took for granted that people have done the graph paper exercise where you plot a bar chart or a line graph in high school or middle school or whatever it was. And then you move from there onto maybe using Excel or Google Sheets. But as I'm really going back and talking with a lot of these students, they've never done that, or they don't remember it because it was such a long time ago. And they've never done the Google Sheets or Excel, you know, simple charts. So they don't even have that kind of foundation. So I like to go back and start with that basic foundation of, you know, that you don't need to know this super computer sciencey code tool. You don't have to download a program that's going to freeze your computer. You can just use, you know, printer paper, graph paper.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm wondering if anyone has anything else to say about this this approach to kind of this discipline or tool agnostic teaching before we move on to our other topic where we wanted to focus a little bit more on teaching about the tools. Devin has shared something. Denise used doodling for technologists.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I'm at Georgia State University, and we just started a program called PIDLIT, where we're trying to get specifically first-year college students interested in data literacy and expose them to data before they're, you know, already in their major, where they will have already, you know, decided what fields they want to go into. And so this has been very interesting to me, because one of the things that has been hard for us is trying to figure out what can we expose a first-year college student to, like what levels of data, if they haven't taken you know, a statistics class yet, how can we get them interested? And then also trying to get students who are going into fields that aren't already a data heavy field. So as Joe mentioned, getting people from in the arts or in some of the humanities can be difficult to get them interested. So I just wanted to thank everyone so far. From all of the discussions you've had has been really helpful. But yeah, trying to figure out, I think maps, at least for me, is something that a lot of people are drawn to, and you can really understand it. You can see, you can visualize it. And so if anyone else has any ideas about what something that is first year level approaches to data visualization to really hook people into getting interested in data, I'm welcome to hearing more about that.
Catherine, your hand is up again.
Yeah, I don't want to dominate the conversation, but Joe was talking about using art also, or having art students. And I want to put a shameless plug in there for, I always start classes with the warming stripes. I'll put that piece link in the chat, but it's a very abstract visualization of climate change. And I put that up there and have students approach it as it's a work of art. Oh no, wait, it's data viz. And I found that a lot of first years really respond to that. So that's it for my piece.
Thank you, Jordan.
I don't want to dominate the conversation either, but I just was trying to remember, Angela actually shared a great video with me a while back. The gal who talks about explicit instruction in Excel. I couldn't remember it, Angela, but
Yeah.
as someone who failed like my first 5 statistics classes, and I mean failed hard, not for lack of trying, I just didn't quite get it, is when I found someone who gave me the explicit instruction in similar to the video Angela, I hope will share in the chat. Suddenly I got it. So I think approaching some different ways of instruction, some people do well in the exploratory pedagogy. Some people just need explicit instruction. Like, this is the series of moves you do to get to here, and it's great. So I guess adding a personal perspective here, I don't fail stats anymore. Yay!
I'm also going to
Yeah.
I was going to very quick. I'm going to share to listeners Twitter. She asked students students asked her to give data visualizations that made, I would never think of that. And there's just a ton of great examples. I think some of them would really people excited, especially at the undergrad level even. And I'm sure many of you kind of saw. There's the thread for people to check out, and I'll put it in the doc as well.
Yeah, and I was just gonna follow up on Jordan to say that I will happily share that video. I've shared it with so many people, and yet it always takes me 10 minutes to find it. The video has been transformational in my approach to teaching tools because it gets me to label things in the tool. It gets me to call things by name and repeat that name over and over again. And it talks about how that's how we learn language. We learn by like repeating our ABCs and our, anyway, I can't say enough about this video. I will happily share it again. Oh, excellent. Thanks, Jordan. Yeah, it's, the woman is also one of my idols because her dissertation is about convincing people that Excel is real programming. And I am fully on board with that. Like I am happy to know R and teach it, but people are doing real honest to God data science in Excel, and it is totally fine, I think, to teach Excel.
So in the chat, Matt has asked, does anyone get much traction out of putting up a bad example and tearing it apart? So this is kind of that approach we were talking about again, of like starting with the visualization and working, deconstructing the visualization and how you got to there through the data and everything that leads up to the final thing. But has anyone gotten much traction out of using bad examples for this? Eric, I don't know if your point is on this or something else.
Yeah, no, it's definitely on that. I find that technique, I would say, I wouldn't call it that. It's not tearing it apart. What I do is go through a critique process with the students, just like I would if they had drafts of figures that they had created themselves. So we always start with, what do you like? What's working well? Trying to explicitly identify what is working well, going over that. Then we switch over to what's not working as well. What are some ideas for making it more effective? And teaching them that process so they can practice that with each other, so that they can go through that I think is super useful. And then that usually comes after some instruction where we've built some common vocabulary around, you know, best practices or things that they should be looking at.
Yeah, Matt.
Yeah, I was just gonna add that that is historic, like putting something up and having them critique it like crazy is something that I've historically used a lot, but I kind of am stepping back from it a little bit because I don't feel like it really teaches them how to do things so much as it teaches them how to tear, like how to say that that's wrong.
But in
I
what sense, sorry, I know maybe we're
No, no,
supposed to
it's
not do
please.
this format, but like, I guess I wouldn't necessarily do just a horrible example. Every once in a while I will, but sometimes it's just kind of realistic first draft examples where it's
yeah.
common mistakes. And I really make sure they start with the positives, because if they just practice tearing something apart, I think that's not as useful. So trying to like get them to really see that first thing that they might produce and how could they make it better and all work together on ideas, I think that ends up being really instructive.
Yeah, no, I completely, that's exactly where I was going with it, is that it's, yeah, I think the question is like, and this just came up in the chat from Allison too, about the intentionally misleading ones to put in there. And there's some, you know, there's some classic examples that I think a lot of us have probably seen. But just the one that I probably get the most aha moments about is when you're doing the initial critique. I always try to slip in the Menard map, like the classic example, because students will almost inevitably say that it's terrible and they don't understand it and it's awful. And then you get to do that fun professor moment of like, what if I told you that this is routinely considered to be the best data visualization ever? And they all kind of like digest it a little bit more. So I don't want to be like a bait and switch kind of person, but it does get something out of it if you can kind of make them see what the power is, even if something does not have the design sense that they're looking for, to get them to look past the flash of the Tableau color palette and the real simple modern aesthetic on things. You can really get a lot out of there.
Yeah, thank you. Joe?
I have a kind of in response to Jordan's comment in the chat about the data conversation between the pro-gun and anti-gun control blogs. So that's something I use too, where a lot of students come into it. So I guess specifically the data viz literacy ones, where we're talking about finding data viz and how to evaluate them to use them rather than creating them yet. So I usually start there with a lot of undergraduate students who are looking for data visualizations to include in their papers and projects. So, and just interpreting them on like Facebook or Twitter. So they come into it thinking that data is very neutral. It's very fact. It's very, you know, like if they see a chart and someone makes an assertion about the data in that chart, that assertion is fact and it's true because it's data. So I love using that gun death example of, you know, two opposing viewpoints using the same data, but in different ways. And exploring those differences, but I don't want to take that away from Jordan, so.
Yeah, great, thank you. That's, I think, you know, approaching these things in the tool agnostic way, we can kind of look more at the visualization critically. But let's take a step back here and think about the tools again and approaches to, if anybody has approaches to teaching about tools in a kind of a meta way. Discussions that we've been having on my campus about open access and open educational resources. You know, we've talked about, do you teach to the students and talk about the publishing industry and why things are open access? So does anyone get an opportunity to teach about these tools in kind of that meta way where we talk about things like, well, you know, Stata costs $1,000 a year for a license, but that's because there are programmers who are making their living on this, and you know, open source tools have their own idiosyncrasies because we have to deal with the fact that it's an open source development environment. Do folks get a chance to approach these topics at all, like teaching more about the tools rather than about working with the tools? Angela.
Yeah, I haven't experienced a lot of this formally, other than kind of one-by-one interactions with faculty requesting training and trying to figure out what tool will work best for that situation. But I was in a reproducibility panel, and I made the mistake of assuming that people who were interested in reproducibility were also interested in open. And we had a very sidebar kind of conversation toward the end of the panel about like, well, I'm okay with code, but I'm going to stick with Stata, or I'm going to focus on SAS, and thinking about, okay, people are on board. People are on board with some parts of the benefits of reproducibility, but that there's still this like, it's better if it costs money conversation that goes on. And we've already covered some of this in the ArcGIS and QGIS discussion, but I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting assumption. I would also make the assumption that if they were interested in reproducibility, they'd be interested in open. That's been my experience, but I think it is the case that's not going to fit in for everybody. This question came up for me because, again, back to the same class that I talked about in the beginning, where the professor taught the majority of the class in R and then had the students try to reproduce it in Tableau. And then I think to Catherine's point about R isn't as pretty as Tableau by default, the students, made something in Tableau and it was more easily beautiful. And then they were able to have that discussion about, well, if you're not getting an education license, here's how much this will cost you to use, versus R, which takes a little bit more wrangling, but is free to use. And there, I think there's a, try and find the point here. Allison had made the point too about, thinking about file formats and, how we save things back into the reproducibility argument and conversation. Like, how does this build into that topic of the meta conversation? Sorry, there's a lot of action in the chat. Devin, move your hand up.
Yeah, and this is maybe an unformed thought that I'm going to try to find the words to capture, but I run into this sort of Gordian knot situation where I start this conversation about reproducibility, and then I find myself trying to think of how I should teach containers, but then I start thinking about like, there's not going to be enough time to give people the full understanding, so maybe I'm just giving them a black box that they won't really fully be able to unpack. And then, maybe this is the same conversation that's been going on with like, how do we teach math? Like, should we just tell people to memorize stuff, or do they really need to understand certain things before we can move on from like trigonometry? But I run into this issue a lot when I'm trying to sort of debug an approach to teaching, especially visualization and reproducibility and open access. So I don't know if other people have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think on that point of the containers and thinking about that and the kind of black box, there's a point from Jess about some of these tools might change things up and you might have to make adjustments if you don't have it kind of containerized and have some sort of package manager to put all the right packages together to reproduce what you're working on. So Jordan has posted a question in the chat, which is tool agnosticism a synonym for teaching literacies and competencies in data viz? Do you want to expand on that at all, Jordan?
I can, yeah, it's just sort of a conversation we've been having. So at CU Boulder, we're talking about putting together a boot camp, a 3-day online boot camp for data visualization and data science. And the goal is for graduate students specifically who have made the choice from their undergrad to the graduate degree, or professionals that are returning, to go from 0 to 60 in 3 days. So we're talking about how do we teach competencies and literacies over necessarily tools or specific tools. So how do we teach in such a way that someone who is working in R can easily transfer those skills to Tableau or ARC or whatever? What are the fundamental languages and pieces that we need to be able to have students troubleshoot themselves, know what they don't know, where their gaps are, and where to find it? So it's just a conversation I've just started in my own head as well as with my colleagues here. So I'd welcome any further thoughts.
Yeah, I think another conversation point that Andy and I had in discussing this was in looking at job postings for data librarians and thinking about tool competencies and job postings that list, well, you need to know R and SAS and SPSS versus you need to understand statistical analysis or coding, etc. Angela.
Yeah, and I'll try to keep my comment brief, but I love the question of how to teach in a tool agnostic way, because I don't know that you can do it without at least one tool. Like like maybe there are some best practices to share that are kind of just general design principles, but so many, I mean, I make the claim that I can teach people what like style seems to work best for visualizations that are not distorting data, that don't have major distortions in them, without talking about tools. But how far does that road go? And I don't think it goes very far. And so even when I talk about kind of being tool agnostic, usually I end up in a tool at some point. And is there kind of a branching point when that happens of I could teach this tool so people become experts in this tool, or I can teach this tool in a way that they become experts in figuring out how to produce visualizations, whatever environment they're in. And I think, Jordan, that's where you're trying to go, is like, even if we have to use a tool at some point, how do I structure this tool-based instruction such that it is about transfer, so that you're getting at these core concepts of using tools to create visualizations. And I think some of that is absolutely just literacy based. Like, what does it mean for a tool to be in this partnership with you of creating a visualization? And what is this tool bringing, and how opinionated is it about visualization, and how is it going to pull against me? Which is why sketching is great too, et cetera, et cetera. But then also like actually get work done. I don't know.
Yeah, that really brings to mind this class that I'm working on, where the faculty are trying to rethink it so it's taught in both R and Stata at the same time. And like, do I have to do my sessions now? I have to write them both in R and Stata. And is that the only approach that we can do to make this, once we get to that point? Like, we just have to do it in 3 or 4 different tools at the same time. Yeah. Sorry, I'm reading the chat here. Yeah, I think this hand drawing approach that we've been talking about, in doing some of the stuff without tools, with tools that are markers and paper, can only go so far. I think we can use it, but at a certain point, you have to start teaching some other stuff. So I'm noticing we're coming up on about 6 minutes left here. Andy, do you have anything you want to say?
I do want to be obviously mindful of kind of wrapping things up on the hour, so we don't kind of keep people over. I think I think we can keep with this conversation. It'd be really lovely to kind of keep going, but we will stop. And you know, check out, we'll be sending an email that will kind of summarize you know, what we kind of talked about, especially share resources. We'll have next month's Viz and Tell, so again, look for that email. One thought, and I thought this was really interesting, and we kind of wanted to kind of have sort of this closing thought about kind of development in this area. And I'd have easily occupied the hour on this discussion point, but we kind of wanted to maybe leave this with you, and when we come back again some other day, we can kind of maybe talk about this. But one we've really been seeing is of database vendors building in visualization tools and platforms into the platform itself. And that's one of those areas where you know, I'm really curious how to engage with that as people who do work in visualization. And you know, one thing that I obviously kind of is, you know, are people out there kind of being process of kind of, you know, testing out some of these platforms, feedback on how, but also just we're going to sort of incorporate these into, you know, all the things that we work on, because it's just a whole new world that's kind of emerging out there. So that's sort of our parting sort of thought. So obviously, I think I'd be excited to really actually hear what folks have to say about this. But we'll kind of leave that for you to kind of consider and talk. And again, we'll kind of hopefully talk about it some other time. But again, really thank you so much for joining us for this Viz and Tell. We'll hopefully see you next month. And yeah, thank everybody for coming out. I don't know, Ryan, if you wanted to also kind of have a final thought.
No, I think this was a great discussion. I think, you know, we covered a lot of the topics we wanted to cover and went beyond them in a lot of ways that I think is really useful, and you know, gives me a lot. I'm going to have to go back and look at all of these examples from the chat. There's a lot to think about and grow on here. So thank you, everybody, for a great conversation.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Take care, and really appreciate you taking time out to come and join us today.